In today's video, we're going to be discussing some more NHL trade rumors. With big names like Karlsson and Panarin moved along, the focus now changes to the Columbus Blue Jackets and Sergei Bobrovsky and Artemi Panarin. Plus, I want to discuss a few updates here on Erik Karlsson. There were a few details and conditions that were involved with this trade, which we didn't have available during yesterday's video when the trade was first announced. We'll discuss all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So it's been an absolutely crazy NHL news week with a couple of big trades with Max Pacioretty and Erik Karlsson. We saw a small deal between the Bruins and the Rangers. It's certainly been the busiest news week that we've had in some time, probably since free agency. So after a kind of a period of time here in the summertime where there wasn't a whole lot of news to talk about, things have really heated up as training camps begin to open and teams hit the ice to prepare for the 18-19 season. So obviously with big names like I mentioned, like Max Pacioretty and Erik Karlsson, those situations are now resolved and players have been traded. The focus now really turns to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Obviously we've already had a bit of a focus on them before, but they're really the key ones left that haven't yet made their moves to decide the future of their star players who are in their final year of their contracts. Obviously we're talking about Sergei Bobrovsky, their key goaltender, and their top offensive player, Artemi Panarin. Now, as training camp opened up here yesterday, both players conducted interviews with the media, and based on those interviews, there's certainly even further speculation to kind of add to the fire here. Both players really appeared to be very non-committal about their futures. Artemi Panarin was speaking to the media yesterday. He kind of reiterated a lot of the same points that we've already had before, saying that, he really wanted to have something in place by September the 13th before training camp. He didn't really want to discuss contract and trade business and all that as the season went along. Sergei Bobrovsky kind of said the same thing, but Artemi Panarin at least seemed to be in a much more jovial mood, was joking with reporters a little bit. So you didn't necessarily get that doom and gloom type of feeling when listening to Panarin speak and going through all of his media appearances yesterday. But it was Sergei Bobrovsky. It was a totally different feel. When Sergei Bobrovsky talked to the media, he was indicating that he already talked to the team management at the end of last year. They knew what his plans were for this year. They knew what his plans were for the future, and that he really wasn't going to say a whole lot about it. When he was asked if you're going to be a Blue Jacket beyond this year, his answer was, "We'll see." It certainly sounded very non-committal and just didn't really provide a lot of confidence, I don't think, for Blue Jackets fans to feel here real strongly that the Blue Jackets are going to be able to retain their star goaltender and their star forward. I mean, neither player at any point in time come out and said, like, I really like playing here and I want to stay. I hope we can work something out. The same jargon that you hear from all players. Even sometimes when they don't 100% feel that way, a lot of times they say the right things, during the media appearances because they don't want to look bad or make the team look bad or anything like that. But you didn't really get that feeling with these guys yesterday. Both players were very non-committal about their future with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and to be honest, if I'm a Blue Jackets fan, I would be very concerned that the two top guys on the team very well could be heading out the door sometime during the season at the deadline or possibly into free agency next year. Obviously, trading a goaltender like Sergei Bobrovsky at the deadline is a little bit of a different type of beast, really. If you take a look at a lot of deals around the deadline, they're usually, bolstering up depth on the blue line or adding some extra scoring up front. You don't really see goaltenders traded at the deadline a whole heck of a lot. If a team is going to get to a point where they're playoff contention and they really want to take it up a notch to go, be stronger for the playoffs, they usually already have pretty solid goaltending. So it's a little bit of more of a trickier deal to do. There'd be a lot fewer teams involved who likely would be interested. I think between the two, the Blue Jackets would probably have a tougher time trading Bobrovsky if this drags on too long. Now, obviously, early in the season, as teams develop a need for an upgrade in goal, they probably would be more likely to get something done sooner than later if they were to go down that road. Now, obviously, the Blue Jackets are aware of Bobrovsky's intentions beyond this year, according to him, but nobody else really seems to know what that is. So we really don't know what to make of it or if he really has any intention of wanting to stay with the Blue Jackets here long term. Obviously, after what we've seen this offseason with John Tavares walking out to the New York Islanders, I think that really made a lot of other teams open their eyes and wake up that if they feel they're at risk to lose their star player, that they're more likely going to trade them before that happens to them during free agency. So teams like the Montreal Canadiens and the Ottawa Senators dealing their star players and getting looked after by the start of training camp are the Columbus Blue Jackets next. Obviously, training camps are just getting underway. On-ice sessions are just starting here today on Friday. So it's not too late to get something done here before it becomes a distraction to your team. So could we see the Columbus Blue Jackets be the next team here to make a big splash and either have Panarin and or Bobrovsky moved in the coming days or weeks before the actual NHL season gets underway? I do certainly think it's a possibility. I'm sure the Blue Jackets would prefer not to do that. I think obviously when you have players of that caliber, your first preference is to retain them and sign them long term. But at the same time, you have to do what's best for the organization. And if you feel you're in serious danger of losing them to free agency, you need to recoup something so that your franchise doesn't take a major step backwards in its development. Now, I want to take a couple minutes here and update the Erik Karlsson trade situation from yesterday. There were certainly some conditions placed in this deal that really weren't apparent until a number of hours after the deal, after the video was posted here yesterday on the channel. So I just want to discuss it a little bit further. As much as the return from the Sharks appears to be large in nature and there's a lot of assets coming back, I guess the one thing that seemed to get the fan base going the most is the lack of a high-end player within that deal. Now, obviously, Dylan DeMello and Chris Tierney are NHL-ready players who are actively on the Sharks roster, who can certainly jump in and play right away, which is good to an extent. You got Josh Norris, who is a fairly high-end prospect. There are a lot of scouts out there projecting him either to be a number 2 or number 3 center. Based on what I've seen of him, I do think it's quite possible he could be a really solid number 2, but we're still a few years away from really knowing his ceiling as he continues to play in the NCAA. The Senators also received prospect Rudy Balcers, who had a terrific year in the American Hockey League last year, his first pro season in the Sharks organization. And really, he does appear to be a pretty decent, high-end prospect. Now, how high-end, it's really hard to say. Obviously, they got some draft picks in there as well. So I guess the one thing that Sens fans were kind of missing is that sure thing, high-end, A prospect that you could certainly count on to be a big part of this team's future. That does appear to be missing here. I think it was impossible for the Sens to win this deal. When you're trading a player like Karlsson, you know that it's almost impossible to win that deal. Now, after trading Mike Hoffman to the San Jose Sharks, as we know earlier this offseason, he was then flipped to the Florida Panthers in return for some draft picks. And you could argue the return that the Sharks got was probably better than what Ottawa received from San Jose in the first place. So obviously, we're going to call that the Mike Hoffman condition. And this deal with the Sharks, they did put another condition in there that if Erik Karlsson shows up on an Eastern Conference roster anytime in the next year, that they automatically get another first-round pick from San Jose that would be due to be paid to them before 2022. Now, they also have another conditional pick in there as well, that they can get an additional first-round pick, which would likely be in 2021, that if Erik Karlsson re-signs with the team and they make the Stanley Cup final this year, then they also get the 2021 first-round pick. So at this point in time, they did receive the 2020 first-round pick as well as the 2019 second-round pick. Those picks are guaranteed, but they could get up to 2 more first-round picks. One of them likely isn't going to happen. I'm sure the Sharks are not going to trade Karlsson to an Eastern Conference team knowing they have to give the Senators a potential 3 first-round picks with this deal. That's not going to happen, but at least it's there to protect Ottawa from that happening. But if the Sharks go deep into the playoffs this year and Karlsson signs a new contract, all that is pretty likely to happen. Obviously, no guarantees, but I think the odds are decent. Then Ottawa will get an additional first-round pick. So to get 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, two pretty decent prospects and 2 roster players. If you think about it, it is a pretty good deal. Obviously, the team felt they needed to do this. They felt that Karlsson was going to leave as a free agent. Now, I also read an article in the Ottawa Sun from Don Brennan. Obviously, Don Brennan's been covering the Senators for a long time, knows a lot of the management and team players very well. His indication in the article said basically Erik Karlsson was kind of hoping for a team ownership change to happen, and that the team ownership change would involve Daniel Alfredsson either being involved either in some capacity with the ownership group or becoming team president. There was a lot of speculation around this team here, which wasn't necessarily always in the mainstream news, but that the Senators were hoping for a team ownership change and that Alfredsson was going to be involved in some capacity and would be either involved as a minority owner or in team president or something to that effect. That Karlsson really wanted that to take place so he could, feel more comfortable signing a long-term extension and staying in Ottawa. Even though the Sharks return to Ottawa for this generational type talent does appear to be underwhelming here, I guess we could say. At least there is a few conditions in there to kind of protect them and that they could get additional picks. But either way, it's hard to imagine there wasn't a better deal out there considering all the other teams that have been rumored to be involved in trade discussions and what type of prospects they have that they could have included in trade deals. So, it's like I said, it's impossible to win this type of deal, but there were certainly some conditions in this deal that weren't really discussed or immediately known that only came to light a few hours after the deal was done. A big part of the problem too, the reaction from Senators fans right now, is they really feel like Dorion and Melnyk are nothing but liars at this point in time. They feel betrayed and lied to. As most of you probably recall, the Senators hosted a series of town hall meetings where Dorion and Melnyk discussed this at great length with fans during the summertime, and they indicated in those meetings that they were going to offer an extension to Erik Karlsson. Their intent was to keep him, and that at the same time they also promised they would not trade him at the draft. Now, technically, they did do those things. They did not trade him at the draft. They did present him with a contract extension, but they had it structured so that they knew he wasn't going to accept it. So it was one of those things that it really doesn't count, in my opinion, as really making an effort. And Pierre Dorion let it be known in his press conference with the media yesterday after the trade went down that he said when him and Mr. Melnyk met off-site and back in February and they discussed the plan for this team moving forward, that the plan all along was to trade Erik Karlsson since February. That he was going to bring them the greatest return that helped get the rebuild process underway and give them the best chance of moving forward and building a more consistent team for the future. So obviously he just admitted to everybody and to the full fan base that they lied to them all summer. So that is certainly not going to help things at all. So at this point in time, I know the fans are incredibly frustrated with this team, and I honestly don't blame them. So it's hard to say how things are going to work out with this franchise. I think they're going to lose a lot of support over this trade. And regardless of the return, I think this fan support is going to damage this team much more than any player on the ice would. So now that we've had more time to digest this trade and really analyze the return, I'd love to hear your comments down below on the Karlsson trade from yesterday and how the Senators are going to be able to move forward here without their franchise player. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.